Welcome to our channel Crime Loom, the place where true crime stories come alive. In a city that never truly sleeps, one man turned murder into a game. He planned every move with cold precision, every death like a puzzle waiting to be solved. No emotion, no mercy, only strategy. Each victim was a piece on his board. And when he marked them with a red X, the game continued. But one detective saw the pattern hidden beneath the silence. A hunter who didn't know she was being watched by the very man she was chasing. And when their worlds finally collided, the game changed forever. Sound of heartbeats slowing. Fade into suspenseful music. This is the story of a mind that kills for control and the detective who dared to play his game. Rain fell softly on the empty streets as the city lights flickered like dying stars. In a small apartment on the edge of downtown, a man named Victor sat by the window, watching the world outside. He looked ordinary, almost invisible, a man you wouldn't notice twice. But inside his mind, a game was already in progress. Victor was not a man of emotions. He lived alone, spoke little, and avoided people. To his neighbors, he was quiet and polite. To himself, he was a strategist. Every move in life, every decision, was part of a game he played only he understood. But his game wasn't about winning money or fame. His game was about control. And the pieces on his board were people. He worked as a freelance technician, fixing computers and surveillance systems. That gave him access to homes, offices, and security networks. He observed patterns, habits, and weaknesses. He watched people live their lives without knowing they were being studied. Victor believed everyone had a pattern, and once he learned it, they became predictable. Predictable meant controllable. Controllable meant beatable. The first time he killed, it wasn't planned. A man had insulted him in a bar, shoving him for no reason. Victor didn't react then, but later that night, he followed the man home. He waited outside for hours, hidden behind the darkness. When the man stumbled out to take the trash, Victor struck. It was quick, silent, efficient. He felt no guilt, only satisfaction, a strange thrill that made his hands steady instead of shaking. It felt like solving a difficult puzzle. And from that night, the game began. Each kill after that was carefully planned. Victor would choose his targets not at random but by type: arrogant people, cruel people, those who believed they could not be touched. He observed them for weeks, studying their routines. He knew when they woke up, when they left for work, who they called, and where they ate. He knew everything before he even made his first move. For Victor, it was never about anger. It was about perfection. Every kill was a challenge, a test of his intelligence. He used no guns, no noisy weapons. He preferred methods that left little trace poison in a cup, a staged accident, a silent blade in a shadowed alley. He treated each murder as if it were a level in a video game. He kept notes, even drawings, marking details about timing, location, and outcome. When he succeeded, he marked the page with a small red X. Detective Laura Miles was the first to notice a pattern. At first, the deaths looked unrelated. A bar fight gone wrong. A man found drowned in his bathtub. A woman falling from a stairwell. But Laura had an instinct for details. She saw the hidden links, the subtle similarities no one else noticed. The victims all lived within the same part of the city. They were all connected loosely to Victor's work, customers, co-workers, or neighbors. Laura didn't know his name yet. She knew there was a single hand behind all these deaths. Meanwhile, Victor watched the news with quiet amusement. He liked seeing the police chase shadows. He admired Laura's efforts. She was intelligent, methodical, and determined. She reminded him of himself. In his mind, she wasn't an enemy. She was a worthy opponent. The game had finally found balance. One night, Victor began his next plan. His new target was a man named Eric, a real estate agent known for cheating clients. Victor had fixed Eric's office security cameras a month ago and had already mapped his schedule. Eric always stayed late on Thursdays, drinking alone after closing deals. Victor studied his routine for 3 weeks, marking every entry and exit time. He drew diagrams of the office, noting where cameras were and where shadows fell. He wasn't killing for revenge. Eric's greed didn't anger him. It was simply another puzzle. Another move on the board. He prepared a small vial of liquid he'd made himself, chemical that caused heart failure, but looked like natural cardiac arrest. It was perfect. Clean, undetectable. That Thursday, Victor dressed in a gray maintenance uniform and carried a small toolkit. He entered the building through the basement using a key he'd copied earlier. The corridors were quiet, the air thick with the smell of dust and old paint. He climbed the stairs slowly, timing each step to the sound of distant thunder. When he reached the office door, he paused, listening. Eric was inside, talking loudly on the phone, his voice drunk and careless. Victor waited until he heard the sound of a bottle being opened. Then he knocked softly, pretending to be a janitor. Eric barely looked up when Victor entered. He waved him off, too drunk to care. Victor moved around the room, pretending to fix a light fixture. When Eric turned his back to pour another drink, Victor added a few drops from the vial into the glass. Then he waited. Within minutes, Eric's laughter turned to coughing. He clutched his chest, gasping for air. Victor watched with calm eyes, feeling the same quiet thrill that always came before the end. When Eric collapsed, Victor leaned over and whispered, "Game over." He left as quietly as he came, locking the door behind him. Outside, the rain had stopped. The city was silent again, as if nothing had happened. The next morning, the news reported another sudden death, a possible heart attack. No signs of struggle, no witnesses, no evidence. Another perfect play. Victor marked the red X in his notebook and smiled. But what he didn't know was that Detective Laura Miles had already connected one more dot. A security camera from the basement showed a man in a gray uniform walking in and out of the building that night. The footage was grainy, but she could see enough to start the hunt, and for the first time. Victor was not the only one playing the game. Morning came slowly over the city. The streets looked calm, but tension moved quietly beneath them like a wire waiting to spark. Victor woke before sunrise. He never used an alarm. His body kept time like a clock wound by habit. He sat up, ran a hand through his hair, and went straight to his notebook. The red X from his last game looked dry now, almost faded. Below it, a new name waited, Bryce, the charity manager. Victor had written the letters with careful strokes, almost like a signature. He brewed coffee and watched steam rise from the cup. It curled like smoke, like the trace of something that no one could catch. He liked mornings because they felt like blank pages. No one suspected danger in daylight. People rushed, laughed, complained, lived, and he walked among them, invisible. Down the street, Detective Laura Miles was already awake. She sat in her car, parked 2 blocks from Victor's building, sipping cold coffee and reading the list she had written at midnight. Victor Hale, age 34. Technician, clean record, few friends. She had driven past his building twice the night before, watching lights turn off in patterns. Every night at 10, the same window darkened. Every morning at 6, the same light flickered on. A man of routine. That made him predictable, and predictability was her way in. Victor locked his apartment door, tucked his small toolkit under his arm, and walked to the bus stop. He didn't notice the car that started 3 seconds after he did. Laura kept a distance, her eyes steady on the mirror. She had no proof yet, only instinct and pattern. But that was enough to keep watching. Victor reached the charity office just after noon. He smiled politely at the young volunteer at the desk, who recognized him from the previous visit. "Back again?" she said, cheerful and trusting. "Just checking the connections I tested last time," Victor replied. His voice was calm and friendly, the kind people trusted without reason. She waved him through. The hallway was quiet. He could hear the faint hum of fluorescent lights, the distant tap of a keyboard. Bryce's office door was closed. Victor opened his case and took out a small sensor device, a real one this time. He attached it to the main security cable, pretending to run a test. He wasn't nervous. He never was. He measured his breathing, counting seconds in his mind. Bryce stepped out of his office suddenly, startled to see Victor. "Oh, right. The camera guy, Bryce said, straightening his tie. You finished that report yet? Almost done, Victor said smoothly. I just need one more reading. Bryce nodded, distracted by his phone, then walked down the hall. Victor watched him leave, then placed a small USB drive behind the router, invisible to anyone who didn't know it was there. It wasn't for surveillance. It was for control. A single command from his computer could switch off all cameras for exactly 3 minutes. That was his window. As he left, Victor smiled at the volunteer again. Everything's fine, he said. Your security's better than most. That evening, Laura reviewed Victor's records again at her desk. She looked at his clients and saw familiar names, a few of the recent victims. Her heart beat faster. It was the first real link she had found. She printed out his client list, circled 3 names, and wrote at the top, he chooses from his work. She leaned back in her chair. It fit too perfectly to be coincidence. She called her partner, Officer Dean, and told him to meet her at the charity office the next morning. We'll visit as potential donors, she said. I just want to see the layout. Victor spent the night preparing. His plan was simple, in and out in 3 minutes. No sound, no sign. He had learned everything about Bryce's schedule. Bryce always stayed late on Fridays, locking the donation box before leaving. Victor would arrive at 9, just after the last volunteer left. He would cut the power for 3 minutes, enter through the back door, and use a syringe, clean, quick, silent. By the time anyone found Bryce, it would look like another sudden medical collapse. He checked his tools: gloves, syringe, USB trigger, disposable wipes. He packed them carefully. Then he wrote one last line in his notebook. Perfection is the point. Friday night came with soft rain again. Victor walked through it without a coat, the drops darkening his shirt. The city lights reflected off wet pavement like pieces of broken glass. He moved with purpose, his mind clear and calm. Laura and Dean arrived at the charity building 20 minutes earlier than he did. They had no warrant, only curiosity. The volunteer at the desk welcomed them warmly, unaware of the danger about to unfold. Laura asked a few polite questions about donations, keeping her eyes on the hallway, memorizing angles and doors. Something about the place made her uneasy. The same kind of unease that comes before a storm, at exactly 9 p.m. Victor stood at the alley behind the building. He pressed a button on his small device. The power flickered, then went out. Inside, lights dimmed, monitors went dark. He slipped through the rear door, silent as a shadow. His steps made no sound on the thin carpet. Bryce was in his office, muttering about the power, trying to call maintenance. Victor entered quietly, syringe ready. The air felt thick, almost still. Bryce turned, startled. What the? He began, but the words froze on his lips. Victor moved fast, pressing the needle into Bryce's neck. The liquid flowed in an instant. Bryce gasped once, then fell against his desk. Victor caught him before he hit the ground. He laid him down gently, almost respectfully. No struggle. No mess. Just silence. Then from the hallway came a sound footsteps. 2 of them. A woman's and a man's. Victor froze. He hadn't planned for this. His mind raced, counting seconds. The power outage still had a minute left. He moved quickly, slipping behind the door as Laura and Dean entered with their flashlights. Bryce? Laura called. The beam of her light swept across the room and landed on Bryce's still body. Oh no, Dean whispered, moving closer. Laura knelt beside the man, checking his pulse. Nothing. She looked around, her instincts sharp. The air smelled faintly of something chemical. Someone's been here, she said quietly. Behind the door, Victor stayed perfectly still, his breath shallow. He knew he couldn't move until they left. But then, Laura's flashlight shifted slightly and hit the shadow of his shoe. Dean, she shouted. Victor reacted instantly. He pushed the door hard, knocking Dean backward, and darted out of the office. Laura chased him down the hallway, her flashlight bouncing off the walls. Stop, she yelled, drawing her gun. Victor turned sharply into the side corridor. Threw his toolkit down as a distraction and ran through the back door into the alley. Rain poured harder now, washing over his face. He jumped over a low fence and disappeared into the darkness. Laura reached the door seconds later, panting, her flashlight sweeping the empty alley. Nothing, just rain and silence. She lowered her gun, frustrated but alive with adrenaline. Dean came running behind her, still catching his breath. "You saw him?" "Just a glimpse," she said. "Male, average build, dark clothes. Fast, too fast." They called it in, but by the time backup arrived, Victor was gone. Across the city, Victor hid in an abandoned parking lot. His hands trembling for the first time in years. The plan had gone wrong. He hadn't expected her there. The detective, Laura Miles. She had moved faster than he predicted. He sat on the cold concrete, his breath uneven. Then slowly he began to smile. It wasn't fear he felt. It was excitement. For the first time, someone had changed the rules. He whispered to himself, "She's playing now." And in his mind, the board reset. The game wasn't over. It had only just begun. The city didn't sleep after that night. The rain washed the streets clean, but fear clung to the walls like smoke. News spread quickly: a second death at the charity office, another sudden collapse, and a suspect who had escaped into the dark. Detective Laura Miles stayed awake for 36 hours straight. She kept replaying the scene in her mind, the sound of the door, the flash of movement, the glimpse of a man's shadow slipping away like a ghost. She had seen the look in his eyes for just a second, calm, sharp, and terrifyingly focused. Victor Hale. She was sure of it now. He had been in that room. He had watched her, measured her, and somehow escaped. But this time, she wouldn't let him disappear. At dawn, Laura sat in her office, surrounded by files, photos, and half-empty cups of coffee. She pinned the latest crime scene photo beside the others. 4 red pins now, each marking a life lost. She stared at them until the lines between them began to form a shape, not random, not chaos, but a pattern that curved like a spiral toward the center. The center was always Victor. Dean entered quietly, carrying 2 coffees. "You need rest," he said softly. "I'll rest when he's caught," she replied. "He's watching us now. I can feel it." She wasn't wrong. Across the city, Victor sat in a dim motel room, the curtains drawn tight. He had shaved his beard and changed his hair, blending into the kind of man no one remembers. His bag of tools rested beside the bed, cleaned and ready. On the table lay a small, torn newspaper photo of Laura Miles, printed from an article about her recent investigation. He traced the edge of her face with a finger, thoughtful. She had been quick. Too quick. He respected that. In his mind, she wasn't an obstacle anymore. She was the only one who understood the game. And in his twisted sense of reason that made her special, he opened his notebook. The red X's stared back at him, neat and final. Underneath them, a new name waited, Laura Miles. But he didn't draw the X yet. Instead, he wrote beneath it, "Final level." Laura spent the next day gathering every bit of information on Victor Hale, his old addresses, client logs, credit cards, phone history. He was careful, but not invisible. One name kept repeating in his records, a repair shop he rented space from. The owner told her Victor hadn't returned since the last Friday, but he had left behind a small drawer with some tools and papers. Laura and Dean drove there in silence. The shop was small, the smell of dust and oil heavy in the air. Inside the drawer, they found ordinary things: screws, wires, a flashlight, and a small notebook with pages torn out. But one page remained, a simple map drawn by hand. It showed a street near the docks, with an X marked at an old warehouse. Dean frowned. "Could be a trap," he said. Laura nodded. "Maybe, but if it's not, it's where he'll be." That night, the docks were quiet. The wind off the water carried a chill that made every sound sharper. Laura wore a vest and carried her flashlight low. Dean followed close behind, gun ready. They entered through a side door with peeling paint. Inside, the warehouse was a maze of shadows and metal. From the darkness, a voice echoed calm, distant, familiar. You're good, detective. Better than I expected. Laura froze. The light swung across the floor but found only empty space. Victor. She called. It's over. There's nowhere to run. He laughed softly. Run? No, that's not my style. You came to the board, Laura. You should know the rules by now. Dean moved toward a corner where the voice seemed to come from. A loud clang startled him, a pipe rolling across the floor. He's moving. He shouted. Laura turned, scanning the shadows. She caught a glimpse of him, the faint outline of a man on a walkway above. Freeze, she yelled, raising her gun. Victor didn't move. He stood still, his face calm, eyes bright in the half-light. You changed the game, he said. No one ever did that before. You made me think differently. I should thank you. This game ends tonight, Laura said coldly. Maybe, Victor replied. But every ending is just another beginning, isn't it? Before she could answer, he turned and ran across the walkway. Laura followed, heart pounding, her footsteps echoing through the metal beams. Dean circled below, trying to cut him off. Victor reached a narrow stairway and descended fast. Laura was close behind, shouting for him to stop. He kicked open a side door that led out to the dock's edge. Wind and rain hit them both as they stepped into the open. The sea crashed against the pylons below. Loud and wild, Laura aimed her gun. It's over, Victor. Don't make me shoot. He stood there, breathing hard but smiling. You're better than I thought. You really are. Drop the bag, she ordered. He dropped it slowly. The metal tools inside clattered on the wet wood, but his eyes never left hers. You know, he said quietly, I never cared about them. The people I killed, they were just moves. But you, he paused, almost tenderly, you make it real? Real? She said, her voice trembling between anger and pity. You're a murderer. Nothing about you is real. He tilted his head. And yet here you are, chasing me into the storm. Maybe we're not so different. Dean's voice shouted from behind, hands where I can see them. Victor looked between them, the detective with the calm eyes and the partner with the gun. For the first time, he looked uncertain. His game had reached a final move. He stepped closer to the edge of the dock, the sea roaring below. Laura took a step forward. Don't, she said softly. You don't have to end it like this. He smiled again, that same quiet, chilling smile. Every game ends the same way, detective. Someone wins, someone loses. Then he stepped backward off the dock. Laura screamed his name and ran forward, but it was too late. The dark water swallowed him whole. Dean pulled her back as waves crashed against the wood. They shined their lights across the water, but there was nothing, no sound, no body, only the storm. For hours, rescue teams searched. They found the bag, the notebook, but not Victor. The sea had taken him, or perhaps he had planned even this. Days turned into weeks. The city slowly returned to its rhythm. The news stopped talking about the game killer. People moved on, but Laura never did. One evening, she sat at her desk, the case files closed, but still on the table. A small package arrived, no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. On it were 3 words, written in neat handwriting. Check the board. Below it was a red X. Laura stared at it for a long time, her heart cold and heavy. She turned to the window, where the city lights glimmered like tiny fires in the night. Somewhere out there, maybe in the shadows or across another city, the game still continued. And in that silence, she whispered to herself, then I'll keep playing, because some games never end. The killer vanished beneath the dark water. And yet his final message reached her, 3 words that kept the game alive. Check the board. Some say Victor Hale died that night. Others believe he's still out there, watching, waiting for the next move. But Detective Laura Miles, she never stopped searching. Because once you've played his game, you'll never really leave it. Music builds slowly, suspenseful and haunting. What if the next move is already planned? And the next piece on the board is you. Music swells. Fade to black if you enjoyed this story. Like, share, and subscribe for more dark tales every week. your move. For watching more amazing videos like this, subscribe our channel Crime Loom.